I have not taken other drugs. I have been, in my past, a very rare user of marijuana. I think 5 or 6 times in my life that I've taken a puff. It's not my thing. I think I'm in more trouble for having admitted that I don't drink coffee.
That's Justin Trudeau talking about his central policy platform. He says he's smoked a few puffs. Our next guest is Jody Emery, the wife of Mark Emery. Before we get to Jody, let's remind you who Mark is. In his own words, take a look.
Hello, everyone. I'm leader of the BC Marijuana Party, actually, and I've run for office 12 times since 1980, so I definitely guess I'm a politician. Well, I've been an advocate for change of some vocal nature for 30 years now. I started doing tax revolts in the early 1980s, starting in 1980, actually, after I read Ayn Rand, and smoked marijuana. Those two pivotal events in my life happened about 30 years ago, and I've been on a real tear since. Now, I've only been an activist for marijuana legalization and the repeal of prohibition for 20 years.
Well, Mark Emery is now in jail in the United States for selling marijuana seeds to Americans. But we've played the next video for you a few times about Justin Trudeau. He was furious at Justin Trudeau for voting for Bill C-15, a bill to bring in mandatory minimum jail sentences for those who sell marijuana and other drugs. Here's Mark Emery furious at Justin Trudeau. Listen.
Pierre Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, for better or worse, depending on how you feel, smoked hashish. And his son has smoked with me 4 or 5 times, so it really pisses me off when I see Justin Trudeau, who took big daggers with me, is in Parliament actually voting for Bill C-15. What a hypocrite. What a guy. And I know.
So you heard it there. Mark Emery says that Justin Trudeau smoked big gaggers with him 4 or 5 times. Well, Justin Trudeau responded just last week, calling Mark Emery a liar. Listen to this.
I have actually only ever met Mark Emery one time in my life, so that's a lot of smoking that I apparently, according to him, did. He's actually flat out lying because in the 5 or 6 times I've ever smoked marijuana, I've never done it except with people I know and trust and who are friends. And Mark Emery was someone I met, but certainly not someone I ever would have thought of smoking with, and I did not ever smoke with Mark Emery, although he smoked in front of me.
Well, who's telling the truth? Well, we spoke to Mark Emery's wife last week and got this statement here. Let me read a quote passed on. I have only smoked pot on one occasion with Justin Trudeau. The 4 or 5 times is 4 or 5 times that evening. He was on the patio of a second-floor restaurant on West Broadway Avenue in Vancouver. That's Mark Emery through Jody Emery. And joining us now from Vancouver is Mrs. Emery herself. Jody, welcome to the program. Appreciate you being here. I wanted to go through that background to set the scene because we had a dispute between your husband, Mark, who's in jail in the States, and Justin Trudeau about what they did together. Were you there when Mark, your husband, and Justin Trudeau were smoking together on that patio in Vancouver?
No, it apparently took place in 2003, and I still hadn't moved to Vancouver and knew Mark then.
Okay, so the statement that we just read out from your husband, that was passed on from him to you, and it was sort of a clarification that the 4 or 5 times wasn't on 4 or 5 separate occasions, but it was 4 or 5 joints in one evening. Is that an accurate assessment of what Justin Trudeau did with your husband?
Well, Mark does tell the truth. We all know he's quite honest, so that could have been what happened. But, you know, it was a decade ago, and I don't think Justin remembers what wine he drank that night or who else might have been there, so I don't know what his obligation is to remember that. But obviously, he might be uncomfortable being associated with the Prince of Pot in U.S. federal prison.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, I will give this to your husband. People may disagree with him. I don't agree with everything he does, certainly, but he doesn't lie about it. I mean, he's quite candid about what he stands for, what he does. I mean, he's not shy about his use of marijuana or his defense of it. I will grant you that. He's very, very honest about his thoughts on marijuana. Now, why do you think... Why do you think this is an important issue? I mean, Justin Trudeau has talked about this with reporters again and again all summer. Where do you think Justin Trudeau's head is? Because as your husband points out, he voted for mandatory minimums for some drug dealers, yet he himself admits to taking puffs. How can he square the two? Is Justin Trudeau going through some sort of policy process, do you think?
I think so, but hypocrisy and politics go hand in hand a lot of the time. So if we started looking at everybody's history and all the things they've been kind of flip-flopping on, then we wouldn't have any politicians if we got rid of them all. So I think flip-flopping is okay when you're changing your mind based on looking into something. We have groups like Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and even Mark's own federal prosecutor have changed sides. They look at the drug war and they say it's unaffordable and we've got to change our policies. So with Justin Trudeau, he may have come to educate himself, but the reason this is such a hot topic is because right south of us, an hour here, where I'm sitting, marijuana is legal. It's being legalized in countries worldwide, like Uruguay. We're seeing change happen, so it may seem like a fringe issue, but when Canadians look at all the issues that are really important to us, there's some massive problems and we feel a little powerless. When you look at something like pot prohibition, which is not only costing us billions, but enriching gangs by billions, why don't we bring that money in ourselves? Why don't we change our laws like other countries and states are doing? So it's actually a hot topic right now, and the majority of Canadians and even the majority of Conservative voters want prohibition to end and a more regulatory framework to be introduced.
Well, listen, you're making the very passionate case for marijuana legalization, as we had Cash Heed, the former West Vancouver police chief, on the other day, who said, look, it's de facto decriminalized now, and we know that. But look, you're making the case. You're trying to lobby for this change, but Justin Trudeau has done the opposite. I mean, at the Liberal Policy Convention last year, he said we don't want society to go in that direction. In Bill C-15, he voted for tougher sentences, not weaker. My question is, how do you explain away his, I mean, flip-flopping isn't even the right word. I would call it a double standard. How can he say he'll take a few puffs, but at the same time condemn liberals who wanted legalization and call for tougher law? That's what I don't get. If he was a lifelong crusader like you and your husband, fine. I understand it, but how can a guy smoke secretly, maybe in his Parliament Hill office, while voting against people like your husband in the Chamber of Parliament? That's what I don't understand, Jody.
Well, that's why Mark was so upset. You saw his rage in that video. I mean, it was very upsetting. We were very disappointed. And even just a year ago, Justin was still kind of, oh, I like decrim, but not legalization. But again, it's very brave and forward-thinking and progressive in a positive way, not necessarily liberal, but you know, it's very wise to move forward on this, and Justin may be changing his mind, but sometimes that's a sign of a good politician, somebody who's not a dinosaur stuck in their ways, who isn't open to discussion. I think it's exciting, the idea that we can take politicians, educate them, inform them about liberty and freedom, and have them side with us. That's why we're proud about Justin Trudeau's shift. I don't think he's going to be coming over for dinner anytime soon, but we do think that someone like that is what Canadians need, somebody who's at least willing to listen to different opinions. And hey, if he had looked at all that info and decided, nope, I still don't think it should be legal, well, at least he looked at the info, and that's something, and we need more of that.
Well, it sounds like you guys have patched up this feud. I guess I just have one last question for you. Are you going to be voting for Justin Trudeau's party in the next election?
Well, the thing with politics is I prefer to vote for the right people, but with our system in Canada, it turns out that it is a game of voting for the right color on the block. I mean, it's pretty disappointing, and I am a Green member in BC. I run for the BC Greens, but I also am open to a lot of conservative ideas and liberal ideas. I think people should vote for the right people and politicians to be representatives of us, not for a party, because parties are hard to change. But that's, again, why it's exciting to see Justin Trudeau open to changing his position. And more politicians should be coming on board and doing the same, because we're the people. We hire them. Their paycheck comes from us, and their job is to spend our money. Almost 50% of our income goes to them in taxation. So really, they should be listening to us and working for us and connecting with us, representing us, instead of just representing parties, which we know can turn into bad systems, be it a two-party system in the US or a multi-party system like here. What we need is good representation and always a defense of liberty, civil liberties, reduced taxation, and smaller government.
Jody, we're out of time. It's great to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining us from Vancouver. Folks, we're not done yet.